Welcome to Josh's Frogs in our Dart Frog Room 2. Today we're going to be learning how to make a bioactive substrate for dart frogs. Now this can actually be used for everything from crested geckos, mourning geckos, and basically anything that'll live in the same environment that the dart frogs go. In a bioactive substrate, there are 8 main parts. First you look at your false bottom, and then you've got your ABG, then you've got your substrate barrier, and then you've got your sphagnum moss. On top of that, you're going to be having your leaf litter, and then you're going to have your microfauna and your plants, and then, most importantly, thyme. First, we're going to actually put our false bottom in, and to do that, we are going to need to take this top off, and then we're going to need 2 bags of false bottom. Now, when you're going to get your substrate layer system, you're going to want to go to the Josh's Frogs website, go to the how-to section, and in there you'll be able to find a substrate calculator that'll help you figure out how much substrate, how much of each type that you're going to need to go into your tank, depending on your dimensions of your tank. So we're going to need the false bottom, a spray bottle. The best ones are the ones that pump because you're going to need a lot of that water. And then we're going to need a dust mask and some gloves. So the false bottom is very abrasive, so you want to make sure that you're wearing gloves, and it's very dusty, so you want to make sure that you're wearing your dust mask when you're working with it. So first I'm going to be putting on my dust mask. So there's a lot of different types of dust masks out there, and your basic ones will do the job. You don't really need a really fancy big one. So I've got a cloth dust mask, basically trying to keep the dust from getting into your mouth and lungs. Then we're going to put on our gloves. I use these nice fancy blue gloves. They're a little bit thicker and they work wonderful. You can also use any type of kitchen cleaning gloves or anything like that. They work wonders as well. So get these guys on. Now the first thing that you're going to do is make sure that your dust mask goes down. Once your dust mask is in place, then you're going to grab your false bottom, open it up inside so you don't get it spread all over, and we'll actually take these leaves out. All right, and then once you get it all opened up, you're going to pour it in. Now when you pour this in, it's going to be really dusty, which is why we have the dust mask. So we're going to pour that in there. Some bags will be more dusty than others. And I'm going to toss that right over there. Get our other bag in there. Now that we've got that in, we're just going to spread it out a little bit, make sure it's somewhat level, doesn't have to be perfect at this point. Then we're going to grab our spray bottle and get it misting in there. So misting this substrate right away basically helps get that dust down so that you're not going to be breathing it in once we take our dust mask off. So I'm going to adjust it so it sprays a little bit thicker. All right, now that we got some water on it, the dust is cleared out. Take our mask off, and I usually leave my gloves on to make sure that when I'm working with it on top, I'm not really scratching up my fingers or anything. So we're going to flatten this out. Now it's really important to make sure that it is really flat as you can get it, because if the water reaches the soil layer, it's actually going to produce some bad bacteria that can actually harm the frogs. So you want to be careful to make sure that the water level never goes up that high. So making it flat makes it so it's easier to judge whether that water level is getting close or not. If you have a dip in the middle, it could be touching that soil layer and you wouldn't even know about it. So making sure it's flat is very important. So I'm going to flatten this down. All right, now we're going to put the substrate barrier in. For this tank, I actually have to have 2 of our substrate barriers. They are 18 cubed. So what we're going to do is make sure that we overlap them. I always leave the excess in there. That way there's less chance of the soil layer getting down into the drainage layer. So we'll get this spread down. Now, I'll leave about 1 to 3 inches on the side. It's not too particular as long as it can hold that soil in. So we're going to even these guys out a little bit, and it looks like 2 inches for this tank. All right, so when we put the ABG in, we want to make sure that all of it stays in the substrate barrier. We don't want any of it getting out. So first of all, we have it in layers when it comes in the bag, so we're going to want to mix it up. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so we're going to mix this up. Now you can use just about anything as long as it's clean and chemical free. So at this point, we're just going to be using this bucket. Now this does have abrasive material in it because it does have some of the false bottom materials. So we're going to want to keep our gloves on for this just to make sure that we don't get our hands scraped up. All right, and that's that. Now once it is completely mixed up, we're going to take a walk right back to our tank and then slowly pour it in. Make sure that as you're pouring, you're guiding the ABG, making sure it doesn't go over the sides of the substrate barrier. What I usually do is I'll actually pack it into the corners first, and then once I get the corners packed in, then I'll actually put in the center of it. All right, so now that we've got all the ABG in there, again, we're going to flatten this out, making sure that we don't have the ABG going over the substrate barrier. Now, if you do get a little bit under the substrate barrier, it is not a terribly big deal. Just if you do get a whole bunch of it under there, you're going to want to scoop it out and pull it back up into your soil layer. All right, so I've got that. All right, now that we've got this all leveled out, it's time to add the sphagnum moss. So we're gonna go make the sphagnum moss in the sink, and I'll meet you there. So first we're gonna start the water. Get that going in there. All right, now that we've got plenty of water in there, we're going to be submerging this moss. And I always leave my gloves on for this as well. There are sometimes thorns that'll come in the sphagnum moss or sticks. And if you squeeze on one of those, it can definitely hurt. So open it up, squeeze it on out. Now we're going to press it down. And I usually break it up a little bit. All right, now you're going to want to let this sit for about 2 hours. That gives it time to make sure that it's soaking in a whole bunch of water and it doesn't dry out your tank later on in the day. So we're going to let that sit for 2 hours and then we'll be right back to it. All right, now that we've let this soak for 2 hours, it's going to look a little bit darker than it did before. And we're going to take this and strain out some of the sphagnum moss, and I usually use my hands to pull it towards me, press it against the wall, and then lift it out. All right, so we're going to take the main batch of sphagnum moss right over to the tank. And now that we have the sphagnum moss at the tank, you want to make sure that your sphagnum moss isn't overly wet, but generally significantly wet is perfectly fine because it's going to absorb into the soil and make its way down. This drainage system is built to let the water flow through it. So we're going to take, and I usually take a little tuft of sphagnum moss, go to each corner and press down. You want to press it in firm, that way it stays in place. Now you don't want to press it so firm that it goes down into the drainage layer though. So making sure all the corners are down, then you're going to sort of fold in these sides and press a little bit of sphagnum moss on there. So there's going to be a little bit more sphagnum moss on the sides than there is in the center. All right, so now that we have the sides secured and we have it pressed down, that way it seals against the glass, we're going to spread the rest of it throughout the middle. Now we want to have it as even as possible because we want to make sure that this sphagnum moss keeps the frogs and animals away from the soil layer, and especially away from the drainage layer, where it is all very abrasive materials. All right, so I've got it nice and packed down, leveled out, spread about. So now we're going to move on to the leaf litter. This is actually one of my favorite parts. Oh, okay. So I'm going to grab the leaf litter. Now this right here is live oak. They're smaller leaves, but they last for a long time. So basically you're just going to drop it in just like confetti, just pretty much a little bit everywhere. Now some people will plant their plants prior to putting the leaves in there. I found it really doesn't matter too much as long as you're planting the plants properly. So we'll take this, set it off to the side. I've also got magnolia leaves. Now the magnolia leaves are a little bit larger. They're also a lot thicker, and they last even longer than the live oaks. They give larger frogs places to hide, and every once in a while you'll find a special treat in your bag, which are these end stems, and these you can use pretty much anywhere just to throw a little bit more of a decoration in your tank. So we'll get a couple more of these guys in there, and then we're going to make this live. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and check out part 2 of this series.